There are days when silence is the only answer that maintains your strength. Today is one of them. The air is dense, saturated with certainties. Every voice seems to want to prove a point, defend a truth, win an invisible debate. It is a day of strong convictions, of beliefs displayed like banners. The temptation to join this noise is immense. The temptation to have an opinion, to defend it, to show that you also know, that you are also right. But this video is not about finding the right answer. It is about cultivating the space where true clarity can finally be heard. It is not about faith or blind belief, but about mental discernment. It is an invitation to resist the most seductive need of all, the need to be right. To begin this journey, this act of silent rebellion, let's anchor our intention. Use the comments below to declare your practice. Right? Today, I silence myself to understand. If this message makes sense to you, I invite you to press the hype button down below. It appears next to the share and download buttons. It's like a super like. It helps the video reach more people who can also benefit from this energy. The day begins with an almost palpable mental urgency. It's like waking up in the middle of a crowded market, where every voice tries to overpower the other, not to communicate, but to assert its own existence. There is a fever of self-affirmation in the air. Everyone seems to have something to say, a truth to defend, an experience to justify, an opinion to solidify. Conversations are not dialogues, they are a series of monologues colliding in the air. Social media turns into a battlefield of certainties, where every post is a manifesto, every comment a counter-offensive. This is not an energy of sharing, it is an energy of demarcating intellectual and emotional territory. This noise is the aftermath, the echo of the exaggerated expansion of the previous days. Where there was once euphoria, there is now the need to justify that euphoria. Where there were once promises, there is now the pressure to defend them, even if they have already proven to be hollow. The ego, having inflated itself, now refuses to deflate peacefully. It fights. And its fight is noisy. It needs to prove, to convince, to convert. But herein lies the first and most profound paradox of today. The more one speaks, the less one hears. Communication, in this environment of excess, collapses. It becomes a dialogue of the deaf, where everyone is so busy formulating their next sentence that they can no longer listen to the one being spoken. The result is a strange form of mass loneliness, a feeling of deep isolation in the midst of hyper-connectivity. It is in this scenario that today's true test is revealed. And it is not the test your mind thinks it is. It is not about having the most logical argument, the most persuasive rhetoric, or the most unshakable conviction. Today's test is not about who convinces, but about who can hold the silence without fear. To hold the silence in this context is not an act of passivity. It is perhaps the most conscious and deliberate act one can perform. It is to feel the visceral impulse to respond, to correct, to defend oneself. It is to observe that wave rising within you, to feel the heat in your chest, the adrenaline of self-affirmation, and in that moment to choose not to be carried away by it. This act of containment is frightening because it challenges our most primal fears. The fear that our silence will be interpreted as ignorance. The fear that our lack of opinion will be seen as weakness or indifference. The fear that if we don't fight for our space in the conversation, we will simply disappear, become invisible. Silence for the ego is death. But for the soul, it is the birth of true strength. It is, therefore, necessary to make the crucial distinction. To remain silent today is not an omission. Omission is an act of fear. or apathy. It is the silence of one who does not care or who is too afraid of the consequences to speak. The silence that today's energy invites us to practice is of a completely different nature. It is silence as power. It is the most refined form of strength, precisely because it refuses to play the game of brute force. When the world's noise tries to drag you into its chaotic dance, your refusal to dance, your stillness, becomes an act of immense power. It is like a rock in the middle of a turbulent river. It does not fight the current, it simply remains. And by remaining, it forces the current to go around it, to change its course. Its stability alters the dynamics of the entire system without a single act of aggression. By choosing silence, you withdraw your energy from the battlefield of opinion and reinvest it in the fortress of your own presence. You stop wasting your life force trying to control the uncontrollable, the perceptions and reactions of others, and use it to master the only territory over which you have true sovereignty, your own inner state. It is an act of power conservation, of dignity, and of a subtle intelligence that understands that, on a day like today, the real victory is not in winning the argument, but in refusing to participate in it. Every mind wants to be right. This is, perhaps, its most fundamental and most dangerous programming. It is not a preference, it is a survival instinct. The ego, the structure of our personal identity, is built upon a foundation of beliefs, of opinions, of truths, and it confuses this foundation with its own existence. For the ego, a challenged belief is not just an idea to be debated, it is a personal attack, a threat of annihilation. To be wrong, for the ego, is a form of death. That is why it fights with such fervor, not for the truth, but for its own preservation. It uses logic as a sword and rhetoric as a shield, and it enters the battlefield of conversation with a single objective: to survive, to win. It is crucial that you understand this distinction. Truth and reason are not the same thing. Reason is a tool, a brilliant tool, capable of building cathedrals of thought and unraveling the mysteries of the cosmos. But in the hands of a frightened ego, it becomes a weapon. It is used to build fortresses of dogma, to selectively find the evidence that confirms what is already believed, and to dismiss with contempt everything that threatens that structure. Reason, in this defensive mode, does not seek enlightenment, it seeks justification. Truth, on the other hand, has a completely different nature. Truth needs no defenders because it is self-evident. It needs no fortresses because it cannot be besieged. It does not need to be proven. It only needs space to be perceived. Truth is not a conclusion reached at the end of an argument. It is the silent space of clarity that exists before the argument even begins. And the tragedy of a day like today, saturated by the need for self-affirmation, is that the noise of defensive reason completely drowns out the stillness where truth resides. Observe yourself. When you enter a discussion with the need to be right, what happens inside you? Your body contracts. Your hearing becomes selective. You no longer listen to understand, but to find flaws in the other's argument. To prepare your next rebuttal, your mind becomes an echo of itself, rehearsing your sentences, polishing your arguments, celebrating your own clever remarks. Today, whoever tries to prove too much gets lost in their own echo. You get stuck in a closed circuit of self-reference, and the possibility of a new perspective, of new learning, of true connection, dies in that claustrophobic space. You might even win the argument. You might silence your opponent with the force of your logic or the volume of your conviction, and your ego will celebrate that victory for an instant. But what is the cost? You win the point, but you lose the peace. You defend your island of certainty, but you become even more isolated on it. Clarity never ever arrives when the need to win the conversation disappears. It arrives in the moment of disarmament, the moment you lower the sword of your reason and allow yourself the vulnerability of not knowing. The moment your curiosity becomes greater than your conviction. Today's invitation is not to become a person without opinions or discernment. It is to detach your identity from your point of view. Your belief is something you have. It is not something you are. By creating this space, this healthy distance, you can hold your opinions more lightly. You can present them without the need to impose them. And most importantly, you can listen to the other's opinion without feeling threatened. It is in this space of mutual security that true communication can finally happen. Clarity is not the triumph of one truth over another. It is the synthesis that emerges when two or more perspectives meet on a field of respect, not on a battlefield. Today, choose clarity over reason. Choose connection over victory. And discover the immense power that lies in lowering your weapons and simply listening. We have been taught to fear silence, to see it as a void, a failure in communication, an awkward space to be filled at all costs. In our extroverted and noisy culture, intelligence is associated with eloquence, with quickness of thought, with the ability to articulate an argument brilliantly and immediately. Silence, in this paradigm, is relegated to the domain of slowness, indecision, or lack of knowledge. But this is one of the most profound and limiting misunderstandings of our era. Today's energy invites us to a radical re-education. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the full presence of listening. And listening, true listening, is the highest form of intelligence there is. Think of your consciousness as a radio receiver. In its normal state, in conversation and reaction mode, this receiver is tuned to transmit. All its energy, all its cognitive capacity is focused on formulating thoughts, on constructing sentences, on projecting your opinion to the world. You are pushing your frequency outward. The act of choosing silence is the act of deliberately flipping the switch from transmit to receive. And in this moment, something extraordinary happens. The energy that was once spent formulating your own narrative is now freed for a single purpose: to perceive. Your senses sharpen. You begin to see what was previously invisible. Silence reveals the nuances that the rush of speech invariably covers. While you are not busy thinking about your next response, you begin to notice the language that exists beyond words. You see the micro-expression of doubt that crosses someone's face for a fraction of a second. You notice the way their hands clench when a sensitive topic is broached. You perceive the dissonance between the smile on their lips and the sadness in their eyes. You begin to read the truth that the body, in its relentless honesty, can never hide. Your hearing also transforms. You stop hearing just the words and start hearing the music behind them. You hear the hesitation in the voice, the slight rise in pitch that betrays anxiety, the coldness beneath a seemingly polite phrase. Words can be a mask, but tonality is the soul speaking. In silence, you become a master at detecting the congruence, or lack thereof, between what is said and what is felt. And at the deepest layer, you begin to perceive the very energy of the interaction. One who observes in silence sees the intentions behind the words. You feel, in an almost visceral way, the energy of the person in front of you. Are they coming from a place of openness or defense, from a desire to connect or a need to dominate, from a genuine sharing or a subtle manipulation? This perception is not mystical. It is the result of your cognitive and intuitive system working at full capacity, free from the task of having to speak. That is why today is not a day to argue. It is a day to perceive. Arguing puts you on the same level of noise as the other person. Perceiving elevates you to a point of observation, to a place of strategic power. Think of a negotiation. Who has more power? The person who talks non-stop, who reveals all their cards, their needs, and their fears, or the person who sits in silence, who listens with total attention, and who allows the other party to fill the void, revealing in the process much more than they intended. Silence creates a vacuum, and human nature abhors a vacuum. People will rush to fill it, often with the truth they were trying to hide. Silence, therefore, is not passivity. It is a form of active and penetrating intelligence. It is the choice to gather all the data before making a decision. It is the wisdom of understanding that the most valuable information in a conversation is not in what is said, but in what is not. By choosing silence today, you are not giving up your voice. On the contrary, you are ensuring that when you finally choose to use it, it will not be a reaction based on incomplete information, but a powerful, precise, and informed response, born from a place of deep and unshakable understanding. We live in a world that is drowning in words. We treat them as if they were disposable, like an infinite and costless resource. We cast them into the wind of conversation. We publish them in the digital ether. We murmur them in our own internal monologues, rarely stopping to consider their true nature. But the fundamental lesson of today, a basic principle of the physics of consciousness, is this: every word has a price. Every sound we emit is an action. It is a creation. It is the release of an energy that, once unleashed, travels through the world and inevitably returns to us in the form of consequence. Think of the word spoken on impulse. It is not born from a place of clarity, but from a need for release. It is a reaction to an internal pressure, the pressure of anger, of anxiety, of insecurity, of the need to fill an awkward silence. It is like opening an escape valve. In the moment, it might feel like a relief. But what was really released? Not the truth most of the time, but a distorted version of it, clouded by the raw emotion of the moment. The impulsive word is a seed of chaos. What is said in the heat of the moment returns as confusion. It creates misunderstandings that later need to be clarified, wounds that need to be healed, an energetic disorder that needs to be cleaned up. Every reactive word you launch into the world creates a kind of karmic debt that you will later be forced to pay with your time, your energy, and your peace. Now consider the opposite, the word that is held with awareness, the act of feeling the impulse to speak, and instead choosing silence. This is not an act of suppression. Suppression is swallowing the word, pushing it into the subconscious, where it will ferment and rot. What we are describing is an act of conscious containment. It is the act of taking that same word, that same raw energy, and instead of spitting it out into the world, holding it in the alchemical space of your inner silence. What happens in that space? The word matures. Silence acts as a slow fire that burns away the impurities of reactive emotion. The charge of anger dissipates. The fog of anxiety lifts. The ego's need to be right loses its strength. What remains after this process of purification is the core of the truth, the essence of what truly needs to be communicated. The word that is held with awareness matures into wisdom. And when that word, now refined and tempered, is finally spoken, its nature is completely different. It does not create confusion. It creates clarity. It does not spread chaos. It restores order. It does not wound. It heals. It does not carry the weight of reactivity, but the lightness of truth. The tool for this practice is the simplest and most powerful we possess: our breath. Before you respond, breathe. This is not a mere suggestion for relaxation, it is a technical instruction for self-mastery. The breath is the bridge between your autonomic nervous system and your conscious will. The moment you remember to breathe before speaking, you are creating maneuvering room in your consciousness. You are interrupting the reactive circuit. You are giving yourself the gift of a second to feel, to observe, to choose. And in that second lies all the difference between the slavery of impulse and the freedom of conscious response. Today, practice this. Feel the weight of each word before you release it. Ask yourself, will this word create more harmony or more dissonance? Is it born from a place of clarity or from a place of need? Is it truly necessary? Often, you will find that what seems so urgent to be said dissolves in the stillness of your own presence, revealing itself to be nothing more than the noise of your ego. Today, silence is your spiritual diplomacy. It is your most powerful strategic tool. It is the recognition that true power lies not in the ability to speak, but in the wisdom of knowing when and what not to say. We live our lives swinging on a pendulum, identified with two dominant forces, thought and feeling. We believe that we are our mind, the incessant flow of analyses and judgments, or we believe that we are our emotions, the wave of anger, the abyss of sadness. But the deepest lesson of discernment we can learn is that our true essence resides in neither of the pendulum's poles, but in the fixed point from which it swings. Between what you think and what you feel, there is an interval, a space, and that is where lucidity lives. Imagine your mind as a sky. Thoughts are the clouds, emotions are the weather. We spend our entire lives identifying with the clouds and the weather, forgetting that our true nature is the sky itself, the vast, silent, and unchanging space in which all these experiences come and go. The sky is not affected by the storm. It is the consciousness that contains all things, without becoming any of them. This sky is the silent space between your thoughts. Accessing this space is not an act of thought, it is an act of perception. It is not about trying to stop thinking, a futile act that only creates more agitation. The practice is much more subtle. It is to sit on the shore of the ocean of your mind and simply observe the waves passing by, without the need to dive into each one. It is the act of shifting your focus from the content of your mind to the context in which that content appears. When a thought arises, notice it. When an emotion manifests in your body as a sensation, feel it. And then, notice the part of you that is observing all of this. That observing part is not angry, it is not judging, it is not planning. It is just aware. That awareness is your lucidity, it is the sky. If you can remain in that space, even for a few seconds at a time, something profound begins to change. The compulsive need to react, to respond, to have an opinion begins to dissolve. From this point of observation, you realize that most of the world's noise and your own internal noise is just the weather passing by. And you realize a liberating truth. The world doesn't need your hurried response. It needs your calm presence. It doesn't need another cloud in the sky. It needs a piece of clear sky. Your presence, when anchored in this space of lucidity, becomes your greatest contribution. A point of silent stability in a world of chaos. We have reached the climax of today's lesson, the most subtle and paradoxical manifestation of power. Observe the scene. A world overflowing with noise, an arena where everyone is trying to be heard, seen, validated. It is a fierce competition for attention, a constant battle for relevance. Energy is spent on screams, on displays, on fast and reactive movements. And in the midst of all this, Someone chooses silence. Someone chooses stillness. Someone refuses to enter the game. Our conventional logic, trained in the law of the jungle of self-promotion, would see this person as the weakest, the one who lost, the one who was swallowed by the noise. But the physics of consciousness operates by different laws. While everyone tries to be heard, the one who chooses silence becomes the center of gravity. Think of gravity. It is not a force that pushes or shouts. It is a force that simply is. It is its immense mass, its dense presence, that bends the fabric of space-time and causes all other bodies to orbit around it. The most stable energy in a system is always the one that exerts the greatest influence. And the most stable energy is the one that does not react. Every reaction, every time you are pulled into the drama, every time you take the bait of provocation, is an act of energetic mass loss. You are allowing your orbit to be dictated by another celestial body. You become a satellite of someone else's reactivity. The person who chooses silence, who chooses observation instead of participation in the chaos, is doing the opposite. They are refusing to let their energy be pulled outward. Instead, they pull it inward, to their center, consolidating their own mass, their own presence. Their stability becomes so dense, so unshakable, that the energetic field around them begins to reorganize itself around them. The noisiest people, the most chaotic situations, begin to feel their calm presence as a force field. Without saying a word, their stillness communicates a powerful message. Your chaos has no power here. My peace is non-negotiable. That is why, today the true power is not to compete. To compete implies that you are playing the same game as others, fighting for the same prize, measuring yourself by the same ruler. The act of withdrawing into silence is an act of transcendence. It is the declaration that you are no longer playing that game. You are playing a different game, with different rules, on a different board. The prize is no longer external validation, but internal integrity. And when you stop competing, something extraordinary happens. You win. You win because you refuse to lose your peace, which is the only prize that truly matters. Do not confuse this with a fearful retreat. The silence we are referring to is not the silence of the victim who is afraid to speak. It is the silence of the master who knows they don't have to. It is a silence that is not empty, but full of observation, of discernment, of contained power. It is the stillness of the eye of a hurricane. And this force, though invisible, is the most potent of all. It is the force that calms a tense room without saying a word. It is the force that disarms an aggressor not by confrontation, but by the refusal to give them the reaction they feed on. It is the force that allows the truth to emerge, not because it was imposed, but because it was given the silent space to reveal itself. Silence, in the end, is not surrender. It is mastery. It is the supreme mastery over your own inner state, the refusal to allow the outer world to dictate your peace. And in a world that is drowning in noise, the person who masters silence is the one who holds the real power. The 17th did not ask for noise, it asked for a pause. It did not demand explanation, it asked for perception. And in the end, we discovered that to understand, not with the mind that judges, but with the presence that witnesses, is the most revolutionary act of all. In a world obsessed with the right answer, your strength was in holding the question, in remaining comfortably in the space of not knowing, where true clarity could finally emerge. You did not fight against the noise, you became the silence that absorbed it, proving that the greatest authority belongs not to the one who speaks the loudest, but to the one who listens most deeply. To seal this commitment to your own discernment and to declare your new form of power, go to the comments and affirm your final intention. Today, I silence myself to understand. Don't forget to subscribe. Silence will always have more secrets to tell us, and we will continue to learn how to listen to them together.